From spinning plates to sowing seeds. I accidentally adopted this life strategy that I realized like after a few decades, I'm going to have to change this, tweak it a little bit. And I thought, maybe if I have this problem, maybe you do too. So let's talk about it today. Let's stop being busy for busyness' sake, and let's adopt a kingdom strategy mindset for living a life of purpose and getting stuff done for the kingdom. You're having coffee with Conrad on
Conrad Rocks!
Welcome to yet another edition of Coffee with Conrad. This is Conrad from ConradRocks.net. Rocks of revelation being poured out. My passion is for you to have a spiritual relationship with the biblical Jesus. Now, part of having that spiritual relationship with the biblical Jesus is to actually produce fruit for the kingdom. What we get in prayer, the spiritual stuff that God has for us to do. It's like rain coming out of heaven in Isaiah. He sends forth his word, and it comes down to the earth, and it has a purpose, and he's going to accomplish something with it. And we're going to talk about that today. I had this epiphany recently about a mindset philosophy that had a lot to do with spinning plates. I thought of things, when I would think about doing things, I'd think, oh, well, that's another plate I got to spin. And I realized that that's the wrong paradigm to operate by, because in the Bible, there's one in the Bible that makes sense, and I think that maybe you've dealt with this too. It's pretty eye-opening, and I'm excited, and I'm happy to share it with you. From spinning plates to sowing seeds.
We are having coffee with Conrad at ConradRocks.net. Jesus!
So this all goes back to elementary school. We had this magician come in to, how they would send, entertainers to the school. And this guy came to school, and he was on our stage, and he started spinning plates. He started out with one stick, got the plate going, then he moved to two or three. And then all of a sudden, he just kept spinning plates. and I noticed that he was running around wildly, just trying to keep these plates spinning. If one started to slow down a little bit, he couldn't rest. He had to run over there and keep it spinning. He was super busy. He was entertaining. However, in the big picture, when you zoom out, he wasn't accomplishing anything worthwhile. And I misinterpreted his actions. I kind of adopted it as a life strategy of like, man, I've got to see how many plates I can spin and be busy and keep all these things going. And then recently I, recognized my error. So with this new paradigm, I can see the contrast, and I was subconsciously, I had it on a deeper level. I mean, I realized that like deep down, that part where it's not recognized consciously, it's like subvocal. It's something you know when you're knower. But when I was effectively living my life, I was kept referring to this spinning plates paradigm. You probably heard me talk about it quite a bit. I do it in social media and so forth. And I realized that this contrast was something in the Bible that Jesus talks about. When the sower sows the word, it changes our idea of producing fruit for the kingdom from spinning plates to, working the field. So here's why spinning plates paradigm is wrong. Number one, it gives us temporarily the illusion of control. We feel like we're doing something. We often feel pressured to juggle multiple tasks just for the sake of doing it. And this gives us an illusion that we're getting things done. This busyness, it leads to exhaustion. It leads to stress. And ultimately, it leads to neglecting what truly matters. We think we're in control. We think we're getting things done, but in reality, we're busy and not getting much done for the kingdom. Another reason this spinning plates philosophy is wrong is it causes us to focus on activity versus fruitfulness. And this is my big complaint about this analogy. We're spinning plates. It keeps us busy, but it doesn't necessarily produce anything of lasting value, except a grain of wheat die. We've got to kill our desires, and we've got to leave a legacy through people. And people are what the kingdom's all about. When you look at the sower sows the word parable. So we need to emphasize the importance of sowing seeds that will bear fruit and contribute to God's kingdom instead of just focusing on activity. We need to be about fruitfulness for the kingdom. Another problem with this spinning plates mentality is it prioritizes immediate tasks that appear to be urgent, and this is neglecting the bigger picture of the long-term goals of the kingdom of heaven. The spinning plates life strategy may seem like a way to balance, all those plates, keep them spinning. It seems like we're balancing something. It seems like we're balancing all aspects of our problems, our urgency addiction that's in the short term, but ultimately it focuses on dealing with emergencies and putting out fires. And there's not really much time spent sowing the word for the kingdom. This mentality neglects the bigger picture and long-term goals, whereas sowing seeds and working our garden encourages investing in people, investing in activities that yield lasting impact even after we're gone. It will contribute spiritual growth, and it's all about advancing God's kingdom. Regarding changing the perspective here, it's fascinating how I arrived at this paradigm shift, because for years, I've been thinking about the faulty life strategy of constantly spinning plates. I need to keep stuff done. And I started noticing that as I was thinking this way, like let's say one of my plates is health, one of my plates is family, one of my plates is podcasting, one of my plates is social media. You see what happens is I keep getting all these plates to spin that seem to make sense to me in the short term. But when I get off with God or examine myself in my deeper level, I'm like, wait a minute here. Where is the kingdom fruit in all of this? And where is this spinning plates thing in the Bible? I was keeping busy, but I noticed this spinning plates thing. It wasn't really in the Bible, and I started reflecting on the teachings of Jesus, particularly his parables about sowing seeds and producing fruit for the kingdom. So I started to see this stark contrast in my life strategy and what the Bible teaches. Now, if you're interested, you probably want to read Matthew 13, 3-8. Yeah, let's just read it.
And he spake many things unto them in parables, saying, Behold, a sower went forth to sow. And when he sowed, some seeds fell by the wayside, and the fowls came and devoured them up. Some fell upon stony places where they had not much earth. And forthwith they sprung up, because they had no deepness of earth. And when the sun was up, they were scorched, and because they had no root, they withered away. And some fell among thorns, and the thorns sprung up and choked them. But other fell into good ground and brought forth fruit, some 100-fold, some 60-fold, some 30-fold. Who hath ears to hear, let him hear. Matthew 13, 3-9.
Jesus speaks of a sower who scatters seeds on various types of soil, rocky ground, thorny soil, and good soil. Only the seeds that fall on good soil yield a bountiful harvest. So this analogy resonated with me as I pondered the futility of merely spinning plates without producing long-lasting results for the kingdom. As I started to embrace Jesus's perspective on fruitfulness in the kingdom, Matthew 13:23, for example, but he that receives seed into the good ground is he that heareth the words and understands it, which also beareth fruit and bringeth forth some 100, some 60, some 30. So I realized that the importance of cultivating a fertile environment for spiritual growth instead of being preoccupied with just being busy for busyness' sake, okay? I realized that I needed to focus on nurturing my faith and bearing fruit for God that actually produces some type of fruit for the kingdom. So when I started aligning my mindset with Jesus' teaching, I'm like, oh, wow, this may seem like a small thing, but it's really huge. Like if you're going to fly from Honolulu to Tokyo, okay, you've got a basic direction, but if you get off 1%, after years of, I'm trying to juxtapose two analogies here, but you see, you're going to be off by a long shot. So the more closer we are to what Jesus says to do, that's more on target. So when I started aligning my mindset with what Jesus taught about sowing seeds in good soil, I all of a sudden realized I need to prioritize my meaningful work over just simply being busy and putting out fires. Okay. So I want my efforts to be rooted in faith and be guided by His Spirit and the wisdom I find in the Bible to bear fruits that endure for eternity. It's about the kingdom. You get it? So now I want to talk about how we actually do something like this. How do we shift our mentality from spinning plates to, working our garden, sowing seeds, tending the farm? So here are some key principles inspired from wisdom from the Bible. Number one, focus on fruitfulness for the kingdom, not just busyness. Okay, instead of getting caught up in busyness, ask yourself, what fruits will this activity produce? Will it bring me closer to God? Will it serve others and contribute to building the kingdom of heaven? Remember the parable of the sower in Mark 4:1-20. Just always kind of like go back to that. We want to focus on good soil and nurturing seeds that bear abundant, long-lasting fruit. Also, we want to prioritize with the purpose in a kingdom mindset. Not all tasks are created equal. Okay, we need to distinguish between what is urgent and what's important. I was listening to this one podcast, and this guy says, if you look at your calendar and all you do is you're finding that you are scheduling interruptions for your big purpose, then you have a problem. Okay. And I think that's kind of like the spinning plates mentality. If you look at your calendar and you prioritize, like all your meetings, I got a meeting with XYZ, I got to do this thing, I got to take my kid to the bank, I got to make the deposit, all that stuff. See, that's busyness. But then if you look at your calendar and you don't see anything of kingdom purpose there, all you're doing is scheduling interruptions into what you're supposed to be doing for the kingdom of heaven, right? So as we're praying spiritually, we're seeking God, who is a spirit, and those who worship Him must do so in spirit and in truth. He gives us that word that comes out of heaven as rain and comes down to the earth to accomplish a purpose. We are co-laborers for Christ with that purpose. We have kingdom purpose, and we're not supposed to be just doing the interruptions, right? We're supposed to be building the kingdom. So we need to prioritize our daily activities on how they fit with the kingdom of God. This ensures that we're not just spinning plates. We're not just putting out fires. We're not just yielding to urgency addiction, but we're planting seeds and tending to the garden for long-lasting impact for the kingdom of God. Now, next, I want you to understand we need to embrace this process. It's just like when you sow a seed, it doesn't make a tree the next day. I mean, you've got to water, you got to pray, ask God to give you some rain. I mean, you got to get rid of the weeds. There's a process here. So just like a farmer, he doesn't expect an instant harvest. We shouldn't expect immediate results in our Christian walk. We need to celebrate those small victories, trust in God's timing. It's amazing to me how God has this timing. If you just start walking in the Spirit, things are going to happen. I see it happen all the time. But we need to remain focused on the ultimate harvest. We're playing a part in that harvest. Do you understand? That's pretty awesome. This isn't about achieving some goal or personal greatness. It's about surrendering our lives, our wants and desires, to God's will and becoming instruments, a living sacrifice like Romans 12:1-2 talks about. instruments of God's love and grace. So by adopting this sowing seeds or tending the garden approach, we can build a life of purpose and significance. I think truly deep down, that's what we want to be, is significant in the big picture, okay? And I'd hate for us to be up there on Judgment Day. We're looking down like, oh man, I was spinning plates. I was busy for busyness' sake. I was scheduling interruptions into God's big plan, okay? So we need to look at the big picture and live a life that truly contributes to building his kingdom. And this means that we need to embrace this process of sowing and reaping. It takes some time, but we need to keep at it.
You want to get closer to Jesus, dig deeper, go higher. It's time to believe this. Conrad's got the word, the wisdom to share. Get your coffee, sit back, let's meet up in the air. Come on now, ConradRocks.net, the place to be. Coffee with Conrad, let's soar on wings. Unleash the prophetic, God's calling, it sings. We're going higher with Jesus, y'all. Let's to answer his call. Dig deeper, go higher. Conrad's got it all.
So now I want to talk about investing in people and making disciples. In the previous portion of the podcast, I was discussing the faulty life strategy of constantly spinning plates, and I contrasted it with Jesus' parable of the sower of the word, which we should all be familiar with, in farming, tending our garden. Jesus constantly talked about that because everybody could relate to it. Now, we acknowledge that true fruitfulness and productivity comes from sowing seeds. And we know the sower sows the word. From the sower sows the word parable, right? And that we are to prioritize sowing into good soil. We need to invest in people and activities that will yield a lasting impact and align our efforts with God's kingdom. So in this part of the podcast, I want to take this concept a little bit further by examining how sowing the word of God is not just about spreading information. Okay, it's not just giving somebody some information and saying we're through, but it's about making a personal investment into people. We're going to explore how this mindset transforms our understanding of evangelism and discipleship, and how it ties into the Great Commission of making disciples. So now we're going to talk about sowing the word into people and making disciples. As Christians, of course, we're called to share the gospel with others, but often our focus is on mentoring others and being mentored. This is a nonstop process, all the way back to Jesus, and even before then. There's this deeper dimension to sowing the word that goes beyond information transfer, okay? In the parable of the sower, it illustrates the importance of finding receptive hearts to sow the seed of the gospel. Just as a farmer prepares the soil before planting, we need to cultivate hearts that are open to receiving the truth. This involves building relationships. Yes, we're called to build relationships. We're called to show love. God is love. They will know that you're the disciples of Jesus by the love that we have. We have compassion as Christians, and we need to, this may sound funny, but we need to create a safe space for people to explore spiritual matters with us. I often talk about having these iron sharpening conversations around a kitchen table. You need to let people know that you're not going to beat them over the head if you disagree with them, okay? And I want you to ask God at some point, maybe right now, pause the podcast, ask God about some of the people that you know presently. Who can you sow seeds into their hearts? Think about it. That's your mission field, man. Now let's talk about nurturing and watering the seed and, getting rid of the weeds. Because once the seed is sown, that's not the end. We need to nurture and water and de-weed so that it can grow and bear fruit. So this involves discipling new believers, providing ongoing support, not just bump and run, right? And helping them to grow in their faith. We can learn from examples like Paul and Timothy, where Paul invested so much into Timothy's spiritual growth and development. It resulted in Timothy becoming a faithful leader in the early church. And the work that Paul put into Timothy still impacts us today. So we need to nurture and water that seed. And what does that look like today? That might look like having a tickler file in your Rolodex, if you know what a Rolodex is, or some type of contact management software, or some type of system where you simply just keep up with people. How you doing? Where are you? What's your revelation you've had today or this week? What's God working with you on? You're nurturing and watering the seed and de-weeding. The kingdom of God's about people. It's about people and what they believe and producing fruit for the kingdom. Now I'm going to talk about pruning and weeding just for a little bit because I mentioned it before. But just as a gardener removes weeds and prunes plants to promote healthy growth, we also need to address some issues that may hinder spiritual growth in our own lives and the lives of others as well. We need to pray about it. Sometimes this includes confronting sin, or providing a correction in a loving manner, and helping believers to overcome their challenges. I think of that passage in James. It's in James 5:16. Confess your faults one to another. And these are probably sins or shortcomings, whatever it is. It's a weed. And pray for one another that you may be healed. So this is something where this takes trust, guys. We have to trust each other. And this is going to involve removing some weeds that are in our lives. The goal here is to create a conducive environment for spiritual maturity and fruitfulness. It's like that safe space. I want people to know that when they tell me they have a shortcoming or they have a weakness or something, that I'm not going to even repeat that to people. I'm not going to repeat it to other people. I'm not going to gossip, but I'm actually going to take it to the Lord in prayer, and I'm going to be with them in their battles that they're trying to get rid of their weeds, okay? So our relationship with our mentors and the people that we're discipling should be strong enough that this doesn't seem out of line. Like, look, I've got this XYZ problem. Can you help me pray? I want to know that when I'm confiding with someone on that they're not going to repeat it and they're going to take it to the Lord in prayer. So we need to have these relationships with our mentors and the people we're discipling that they know that they can trust us with information that they're struggling with.
Conrad Rocks Coffee with Conrad is the best Christian podcast ever created.
Now let's talk about multiplying and bearing fruit. The ultimate goal when we sow the word, right? The sower sows the word, in making disciples is to multiply believers who will in turn sow seed into others. Not just impart information, but disciple. That's the goal. This is the principle of multiplication, where each disciple becomes a disciple maker. As we invest in others and we equip them, with the equipping of the saints to make disciples, we create a ripple effect that can impact generations to come, right? It's pretty cool when you think about it. So when we adopt this mindset of tending the garden or sowing the word into people, not just information, but the word, which is transformative, and making disciples, we move beyond this transactional type of approach to evangelism. We embrace this relational and transformative understanding of our calling. It's not just ticking off numbers, but it's about investing in lives, investing in people, nurturing spiritual growth, and leaving a lasting legacy of faith. In this podcast, we discuss the importance of shifting from a constant spinning plates mentality to a sowing seeds approach in our lives. We explored how this mindset aligns with Jesus' parable of the sower sows the word and the principles of fruitfulness, producing fruit for the kingdom. We highlighted 3 key points, focusing on fruitfulness, not just activity, by considering how our actions actually contribute to God's kingdom. Prioritizing our tasks based on their long-term spiritual impact, distinguishing between urgent and important matters. Embracing the process of sowing seeds, understanding that the true growth is going to take some time and it requires patience. So when we adopt this sowing seeds approach, we can build a life of purpose, significance. I think we all want to be significant in the kingdom. We don't want to be the bump on the log. We want to be like, look back at our lives and say, yeah, I played a part in this. I played a part in this kingdom. I want to know that I contributed to building God's kingdom. We also emphasize that sowing the word is not just about spreading information. It's not just giving somebody some information, but it's about investing in people, building relationships, and creating a space for spiritual growth. We also explored how this mindset transforms our understanding of evangelism and discipleship, aligning with the Great Commission of making disciples. We discussed the importance of finding receptive hearts. Who is God showing us that we need to sow into? We talked about nurturing and watering the seed and addressing issues that may hinder spiritual growth. So ultimately, the Sowing Seeds approach aligns our lives with God's will and allows us to become instruments of His love and grace, making a difference in the world around us. So if this podcast has touched you, please share it with your friends and family on social media. Remember to follow my social media accounts. The links will be in the show notes. I get a lot of my show ideas and interaction about the shows on social media. And there's some freebies in there, the sponsors that they give you some free stuff in the show notes, so check it out. And you can also check out my books, Open Your Eyes, My Supernatural Journey, and Overcoming Night Terror, Making the Demons Leave. God bless you. I want to thank you for being in my life. Till we meet again, dig deeper and go higher.
Dig deeper, go higher at comraderocks.net.